every single bias you have will become a limit upon your consciousness, making your consciousness less than infinite, meaning that you will disconnect yourself from God. And this is why scientists have such a difficult time with God. Because the scientist has chosen the lesser rather than the greater. The scientist has chosen to observe ants down on the surface of the earth rather than living in a space station up in the sky, looking down on the whole earth. Choose which one you want. If you want to see the totality of the earth, you have to zoom out. To zoom out, you have to remove all your biases in this example. And if you're biased towards studying ants, all you'll understand is ants. If you're biased towards studying kangaroos, if all you care about are kangaroos and nothing else, then all you'll know are kangaroos. If all you care about are numbers, all you'll know are numbers. If all you care about particle physics, all you'll know is particle physics. I mean, isn't this fucking obvious? And yet we have particle physicists and mathematicians and psychologists and whoever else pretending as though they figured out all of reality through their little subdomain. It's absurd. It's fucking absurd. It's pure idiocy. All of that is bias. Recognize that every subfield of science is self-biased. See, the mathematician thinks that reality is fundamentally mathematical. The physicist thinks that physics is most fundamental. The biologist thinks that actually biology is fundamental. There are books written by biologists who say that physics is not what's most important. Actually, it's biology. Consciousness is biology. Of course, that's delusional too. Now, there are computer nerds and computer scientists who think that all of reality is fundamentally a simulation. It must all be a computer. Why is that? Because all they fucking know are computers. When all you have is a computer, everything looks like a keyboard. Perhaps that's a bad way of stating the old Mark Twain quote that when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The astrophysicist thinks that the Big Bang is what explains everything, is most fundamental. The psychologist thinks that psychology and psychological archetypes, Jungian archetypes and so forth, that's what's most fundamental. Myths are what's most fundamental. Which of them is right? It's the old situation of the 5 blind men trying to describe the elephant. None of them are right. They all have a little piece of the elephant. They don't have the whole elephant. Now you might say here, but Leo, okay, but what about you? What about you, Leo? The mystic thinks that consciousness is fundamental. So isn't that the same trap? Aha. How is that any different? The computer nerd reduces down reality to a computer, the physicist to particles, the mathematician to numbers, the biologist to biology, the psychologist to psychology, the mystic to consciousness, and therefore consciousness isn't the fundamental thing. Right? Wrong. Because the mystic is doing something fundamentally different than all the others. The mystic is going meta, and the mystic is going holistic. That means the mystic is incorporating everything. Mysticism is not another subdomain. It is not a siloed subfield of any kind of science. The mystic goes after truth. And truth is consciousness and love. And it incorporates all of the mathematics, the physics, the biology, the computer science, the astrophysics, psychology, all of that is incorporated and included within the larger system of consciousness. Consciousness imagines all of those things. So while it might seem like I am as a mystic, reducing all of consciousness down, all of reality down to consciousness in the same way that a materialist will reduce it down to atoms. There is a difference. The difference is that consciousness is imagining matter, atoms, and the materialist. Whereas matter is not causing consciousness. That is the difference. And you can become directly conscious of that. Because you are consciousness. And because consciousness is all there is. How convenient, right? It's perfect. So what I want you to really deeply understand here is that whatever finite method you use to study nature, that method will be biased because nature is actually infinite. Your method will always crack under the strain of nature. It's as though you're trying to wrangle an infinitely sized elephant using some lassos and some rope, which is made out of grass, and it tears and it rips because this infinite-sized elephant simply cannot be tamed. It cannot be wrangled in any way. I want you to further notice that even the questions you ask of nature are themselves biased. Every question you ask is a bias itself. What kinds of questions you ask, these are manifestations of your biases. If you ask the question, is reality mathematical? That's a kind of bias you have. And you might get a certain biased answer. And if you ask the question like, how does the brain create consciousness? See, that's a bias when you ask that question. You're assuming the brain creates consciousness. You're taking it for granted that it could be the opposite. It could be consciousness that creates the brain. But you're so biased, you don't recognize that. And you don't even care. Also, your curiosity for nature is biased. When you love kangaroos, but you hate elephants, that means you're going to study kangaroos, but you can't study elephants properly. When you love particles, but you hate consciousness, you can't study consciousness properly. When you hate meditation, you can't meditate properly. Instead, if you love thinking, you're going to be lost in monkey mind all the time. If you're passionate about numbers, all you'll see are numbers. So beware of narrow passions in this pursuit of ultimate understanding. Your passion has to be very wide. Your passion literally has to be universal, not narrow. And you might say, well, Leo, but isn't consciousness a narrow passion? It might seem that way, but if consciousness is all that there is, then by definition, a passion for consciousness is a passion for the whole universe. See? Now you might say, but Leo, if I'm passionate about particles is all that there is too. So if I'm passionate about particles as a physicist, doesn't that mean that I'm passionate about the whole universe? Actually, no. Because particles is not all that there is. That's an assumption. That's part of your paradigm you got to question. You're locked into that paradigm. Now you say, oh, but Leo, but isn't consciousness also a paradigm? Saying that consciousness is everything, that's also a paradigm. That also could be wrong. No, it can't be wrong, because consciousness is every paradigm. What imagines all paradigms? Consciousness. Consciousness is not a paradigm. Consciousness is meta-paradigmatic. It's meta-everything. It's infinite. You can't beat consciousness. See, you materialists and rationalists and skeptics, you're trying to weasel your way out of consciousness somehow. You're trying to come up with some sort of theory or idea or scheme or you're trying to find some sort of loophole within reality so you can avoid consciousness, facing it directly. But you can't, because there's only one thing in the universe, and it's consciousness. You can't escape consciousness only through delusions and mental gymnastics, which is what you love to do.